Hello and welcome to another jungle video. I am Rek'Sai, and in this one I will be presenting to you the current and future top junglers as of patch 8.3 leading into patch 8.4. Patch 8.3 just went live, so I'll talk about the Sejuani and Jarvan nerfs as well as the Rengar revert coming up in patch 8.4. As before with this video, it is not a cut and dry tier list, it is merely a compilation of the best performing junglers for you to succeed in solo queue, in my honest opinion. If you one trick or win a lot with something I don't mention, keep on going, but if you're hard stuck, getting a bit frustrated with the meta, consider switching up to one of these choices and see what works for you. Alright, who else could we start with other than Sejuani, dominating pro play and high elo play in the tank position? She is still the ultimate tank who scales into something invincible, tons of CC, and a natural armor magic resist passive, meaning she can rush warmogs and stay out on the field for long periods of time. The reason that I'll mention the early game here isn't that she's inherently powerful, but that she has a lot of CC for early game ganks. There are junglers who can 1v1 and pressure her and keep her down, such as Shyvana, but that doesn't always happen at every rank bracket, and so she's allowed to scale freely while applying as much pressure as she wants. They did nerf her Q with 1 point in it from 13 to 17 seconds cooldown, which is substantial, and we'll have to see how this affects her in the coming weeks, but she still has enough CC and enough durability. It's really a light touch on her overall kit. She will lose out a bit in repeat team fights because you normally max W and then E, so it's the last thing you max. We might see people mixing that up a bit to get a few points in Q, but she should be fine. Next up is Nunu, who went from disco to permaban very quickly. Despite a hotfix to his Q during patch 9.2, he still remained in the top tier. His W provides fierce buffs for his team, especially with champs such as Varus, Cog, and Azir, who can use their attack speed and AP. His Q passive means you can slap people in the early game, and the free smite as well as his E slow gives Nunu neutral objective control as well as counter jungling preference. But he's also a team fighting powerhouse with a zoning ult along with a W buff. He did not receive any additional nerfs or touches in patch 8.3, so feel free to keep on snowballing the enemy into tilt. Shyvana has remained in the top tier with her fast clearing kit, her 1v1 potential, her ability to control drakes, as well as her strength in the course of fights with a great counter ganking ult, as well as something that can engage. She's a smart pick into tanks provided you hit her E, as orders will do percentage max HP damage along with the Blood Razor. You can use her to pressure picks like Sejuani and starve her out of ganking paths and neutral objectives. Shyvana can be built more damage your tank is needed and still remains firmly up top the win rate charts. She works well in low MMR and higher MMR, but you still need to play the lanes and not get lost in AFK farmland. For more, see my recent gameplay breakdown, but I still recommend Shyvana as one of the top few junglers you can truly carry at any MMR at the moment. Warwick is another consistent and dominant pick who, along with Shyvana, gains the most from the precision tree and pressy attack. He's a very strong low-mid MMR pick with his high damage, mobility, and tanky kit, but can be played at any bracket. He just loses his effectiveness the higher up you go when people understand how to kite and play around his abilities. You can be what your team needs you to be and also be able to rotate fast to any low enemies and be involved as much as possible, similar to Shyvana in that case. Your fast farming and the built-in sustain gives you a skirmishing advantage where people will underestimate his healing and DPS as both of you get lower health. The buff a few patches ago to Tiamat, plus 5 AD memes, only give him a little bit more to work with. You can solo that Fire Drake at level 3 as well, so be sure to have a look at my in-depth warrior guide for Season 8 to learn more. Skarner has risen up the ranks again due to his recent buffs, as well as with the popularity of Spellbook and Cosmic Insight, which allow him to smite and therefore farm much faster than before. However, with the nerf to Spellbook to 15% instead of 25% cooldown on summoner spells, the shift of Magic Footwear into the same tree as Perfect Timing, he might take a slight hit. However, the nerf isn't that drastic and he could still be quite popular and effective using the same rune set. With his need to be in super close range for his ult, and having that flash up more often, it was definitely an attractive rune setup, but he also has a good win rate with Aftershock, so some players might feel that offers Skarner more in-fight sustainability along with his strong lockdown CC, and at the very least the Scorpion will remain a viable pick and very strong at least up until Diamond. Finally, it wouldn't be a top 5 or 6 junglers if I didn't put Kha'Zix here again. Despite his soft nerfs, he's still very strong and the best all-round assassin. His deep and involved kit and requirement of positioning, pathing, and teamfighting prowess means he's a better pick for the higher rank you go, where you understand the ins and outs of his limits as well as your teams. For the low MMR, the rest of these picks provide better sustainable options. Nevertheless, if you love Kha'Zix and love that typical hard carry assassin, he is still by far the best pick for that. Make sure you evolve that R first and use that free camera while leaving a bush to gain a lot of surprise attacks and burst damage. His mobility and poke options from the W and E evolve mean that when you're Fred, you can deliver the full assassin combo along with incomparable 1v1 surprise isolated damage. damage. His win rate is on the lower side compared to the rest of the picks in this tier, but that can be attributed to his play rate as well as his higher skill ceiling. If you want a learning curve but also a high damage carry, Kha'Zix still does the job. In the second grouping, which I ranked just below the previous page in terms of overall power for solo queue, we start off with Shaka. I don't have much to say on Shaka, I don't play him that much, but he's a champ many of you mentioned during the last tier list. He has risen to a slightly niche power point, and although his play rate isn't that low, he still requires a ton of practice to get used to his unique playstyle and early game pathing. You want to get ahead and use that to snowball the game hard and annoy the enemy jungler. Having no impact early on won't help, as the enemy can often outscale the damage you output when you have that weak early game, as well as affect lanes, which basically when you have lots of CC and scanners, he becomes a bit useless. And for that reason, I don't recommend him at the lower MMRs, and more so would suggest the rest of the champs on the list. However, I did want to mention him as his win rate is good and he is strong overall. Jhin, after receiving some small nerfs and changes to press the attack, has had his power reduced since the dominance of the preseason, but his strong early game dueling potential and easy level 3 or even level 2 ganks mean that any successful kills can be easily snowballed into a strong mid game victory. Don't play him passively, be aggressive, and don't underestimate the amount of damage that he can put out during those crucial early Drake fights. Jhin also has strong tower taking potential, so make sure to punish any lanes that you have camped and take that lead into the enemy jungle and make him irrelevant. While Sejuani has remained the dominant tank, Rammus has fallen down a little bit, but still remains a strong spiky ball of AD death. Better at lower ranks where people don't coordinate or use vision often, you can exploit multiple ganking paths with a speed and point and click CC to easily get your laners ahead. He also has a powerful mid and late game engage that forces the enemy team to peel for you or to buy QSS when they might prefer to spend gold differently. Higher rank players will know how to play around his linear playstyle, so it's not like he's super dominant up there, and that's why Sejuani and Zack are stronger, but nevertheless he's great in that mid MMR bracket. We return to Jarvan, who remains a strong pick in the early game with high lockdown late game team fighting CC. He was just nerfed in patch 8.3, and his early armor is nerfed slightly. The idea is to lower his skirmishing power against other junglers. It probably won't affect his clear too much. He is propping up again as a popular pick. It affects top lane Jarvan more than it does jungle Jarvan, but unless exploited, it won't really change his overall power, his level 2 gank potential, his ability to eradicate an ADC or just be a tank disruptor and engage tool late game, and his Q providing that attack speed buff for taking towers and objectives. A newcomer in the recommended top tier and gaining popularity even in pro play is Jax. He's a strong Warwick type hybrid damage semi-tank fighter in lower MMRs where you need that sustained damage, tankiness and CC to carry your teams, but also a tank Cinderhulk building annoyance at higher ranks. His Q provides a nice chase down tool and as well as an escape tool, and his W stacking damage can be rewarded on long lane ganks where a summoner has previously burned a spell. His CC means you can hit multiple champ stuns when timed correctly, and also have the option of a damaging split push should you be into the more Blood Razor DPS build. That sort of pressure can easily win games at ranks where people don't know how to deal with strong split pushes, and it's why champions like Jax are still good in the top lane at those ranks. It's because they're unsure of how to position and fight Jax 1v1. He's definitely a little bit of an underrated pick still, but he is gaining in popularity. Try him out if you like to have a bit of damage and tankiness in your early game, as well as the ability to be full tank if needed. We'll end this second tier group with the strongest, at least currently AP champ in the jungle, Nidalee. I'll reiterate that she has a high mechanical threshold and isn't something you should play while still learning how to carry from the jungle, as all her benefits and strengths are only useful when you're not fiddling around trying to hit her combos and spells. For this reason, she's definitely most viable at higher ranks. If you are around that plat elo though and want to spend the time mastering Nidalee, be prepared to take a hit while you do it, but with enough time and dedication, the payoff can be big provided you have a solid understanding of jungle basics and good overall mechanics. The nerf to Spell Thieves tempered her slightly but didn't do enough to knock her down a tier due to her build versatility. Alright, as always, those are simply the stronger recommendations, but you must first and foremost have fun with the champs you're playing, or you're more likely to burn out and not enjoy your time playing the game. However, be aware that if you're like me and become fascinated with something like Release or in jungle, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage versus the current stronger champs, but if you know how to navigate around them, you can still win. It just requires that bit extra from you. So, for this final major grouping of champions, we're going to start off with Evelynn. She's become a main of mine since the rework, and the Spell Thieves change plus the Enuf took her down a bit and the damage loss was noticeable. She is still strong in the right hands but no longer overbearing. Riot has acknowledged this and thus are looking to give her some buffs back into her E in 8.4, so if you're watching this guide around that time, keep in mind that she will be stronger and might return to the strongest AP jungler and perhaps even the strongest assassin over Kha'Zix once again. Speaking of assassins, Rengar's Rebirth is coming in 8.4 and restores his old Q mechanics while keeping some of the aspects of his rework. I'll be doing a gameplay breakdown of him when this goes live, so be on the lookout for that if you're only watching this in a few weeks' time. The changes also bring back his AP ratios, and so there will be a few ways to play Rengar once again, from crit to lethality to AP. I used to main Rengar jungle even before the Pharaoh Flare days when people used to threaten dodging if you picked him in the jungle, so I'm very excited to see this change, and if done well, could propel him, along with Evelynn, into the top 5 or 6 junglers again. Moving on to Cain, he hasn't been in the limelight as much recently and maintained his average win rate, but don't be fooled. A blue Cain can still dominate as an assassin, but definitely suffers from the Lulu CC shield crowd, so positioning is key, and ensuring a snowball by constantly picking off out of position targets is vital. Ras did receive some buffs back at the start of preseason and is still the smart option should you be behind. With his low CDW knockup as well as spell healing, he can go damage or tanky while being a strong engager, disruptor, or peeler. Cain just isn't as strong as the others that come before him in this video and can have a hard time in those matchups where they deny him the possibility to get his transformation. I will be doing a gameplay breakdown of Ras to go along with my Blue Cain guide to show his power when used in a behind situation. Udyr and Vio next, and the reason I'm talking about them is that, for one, Udyr actually has a good win rate, but I don't recommend him in higher MMRs where teams understand how to navigate his map pressure and also kite and CC him accordingly. That isn't to say it isn't possible, there are just ways to stop him and ways to create that pressure while bringing other things to the table. He still has a dedicated following and certainly performs better than a lot of junglers do currently. Vi, on the other hand, is often talked about in my comments section. She's a strong snowball champ with assassination potential or just raw tank engage. The reason she doesn't have a higher win rate or isn't used more often is that she's very much an all-in champ, and that can be rough in the current meta where peel is rife along with high attack speed, kiting ADCs, which can thwart her attempts in a group situation. The junglers on the previous page are just all-round better junglers for the time being and offer more than what Vi does, but with a bit more added versatility. If you're around that silver MMR, she can definitely be used to carry yourself out with devastating ganks, solo dragons, and high damage combos, but a safer bet, if you don't at least main her player often, is to perhaps select one of the champs from the first 2 pages, maybe along the lines of Warwick. Her high Q base cooldown also means that should she miss that in any skirmishes with another jungler, she's at an inherent advantage. But as always, if you know everything about a champ, understand every matchup, and you're winning with her, she's by and far still a very good jungle champion. She's just not quite at the same level as all these other meta champions. Finally, I just want to give some love to the tanks and talk about Zack a little bit. He's basically another type of Sejuani, but without the ability to hold his own in 1v1s in the way that Sejuani can. He's much better in a pro setting than in solo queue, but his unique range on E and special angles that he can use to gank means that if you're playing well and have someone you're playing with, maybe like a really talented Yasuo, you can definitely have a lot of fun. He's just not as strong in solo queue as he is in pro play. He's definitely underrated in a coordinated team should you be lucky enough to have one, and he's kind of in that same class as Vi, Udyr, and Cain, just below the first 12 champions I showed in this video. Alright, hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the stronger junglers in solo queue at the moment, with enough versatility if you're thinking of picking something up to learn to carry yourself out of whatever rank bracket you're in. On screen you will see some of the higher skill cap junglers that really are only at their most effective in higher MMRs just because of the combination of mechanics and game knowledge that is required to ensure their best success, such as tunnel utilization and planning with Rek'Sai, as well as the auto cancels and understanding how her power spikes in the early and mid game, itemization work, etc. Lee Sin is also fun but not as strong as he was in the preseason, and he's underpowered compared to the meta champions, while Elise is similar to Rek'Sai in terms of early game execution knowledge, high mechanical requirement, and where your team is more likely to understand her kit as well as the player in order to close out games in the right way in the early mid part of the game. Finally, you will see some Camille here as she is rising in popularity in solo queue because of those strong early ganks and strong snowball power curve. So I'm sure you'll see more of her in the coming weeks, barring any changes in future patches or runes. And don't forget that Kindred is still a nice niche pick as well against tanks. I just don't think she's really that great into all the current strong matchups. And for all my Volibear enthusiasts, we're getting buffs in the PBE, so we might be able to go around slapping some people again in the next patch or 2. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and comment and share if you enjoyed this video. Things like this take a lot of time and footage, and so sharing and liking really helps the channel out. Subscribe for more jungle videos coming soon, and as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.